what purpose do you think the red herrings serve in not necessarily just at the surface level, because I don't find them a flaw. But what do you think they serve in the
Realism. They
narrative?
add realism. They are digressions that are interesting that get a reader thinking, "Oh, this is going to go someplace. This is interesting." Because Virgil Walker, the character, is a very Mickey Spillane-like character. He even has a secretary called Velma, which Mickey Spillane's character Mike Hammer had a secretary called Velma. Um, he is the archetype of the classic uh, gumshoe detective of the mid 20th century pulp fiction books, and yet nothing ultimately becomes of him. At least in this book, we find little things about in a later book, but nothing ultimately comes of him. But it sets up expectations that are dropped, and in real life, you have disappointments. And by the end of this book, most people are gonna have forgotten about Virgil Walker, except that Virgil Walker reoccurs in another book. And so sometimes, and there are threads that I leave in some of my books that I do pick up and explain in later books. In a book like 64, the book that comes after this, the little book, we find out, for example, who hired Manny Cole to write the New York Quartet and why. You
Do you think the act of forgetting some of these threads and these characters is a strength of the book?
Yes, because
Yes, I would
because it
agree.
acts as a ghost thing. Because there are other things that are forgotten, and when you get five or six or seven or eight things that don't go anywhere, the mind says they must be going somewhere for something. So people then make connections, and they make connections that may not be correct, but will satisfy them in some way, because they don't want to appear dumb. But it also, when you get that third or fourth red herring, people remember, oh, wait a minute, there was something like this, 800 pages ago. Because overall, the book, if it was published, would be something like 7,200 pages. And so you can have two or three novels length of difference between these red herrings, and people have that memory. And again, it's that Bellatar like compression, that we're compressing the things, that every time these red herrings come in, it this book is so long that when you're reading it, it feels almost like real time. And that when a character disappears for 1,200 pages and then come back, you feel, oh, he's back or she's back. For example, Paulie Maravelli's young wife, Carla Schmidt Maravelli, we see her in the first half of the book, in book two, plotting with her Jewish banker, Jewish ad man lover, to kill off someone. And then she goes away, and then she comes back and she meets Paulie. She had seen Paulie at a restaurant early on, but nothing ever came of that. And then she comes back, about 3,000, you know, uh, maybe about a million words later. She comes back. It's about 2 or 3 years have passed within the book's time, and then she meets Paulie and gets married, and they have a terrible marriage and whatnot. And and yet we know when she comes back, we're like, oh, that's right. Whatever happened to her? And that's the same thing that happens with these deliberate red herrings. Is that when you get something, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the first red herring, you'll say, there was something like that in the book. What was that? And it forces people to go back and try to make connections. But we always have things in real life that we ascribe an import to that they don't really have. This is what real life is like. Gives part of the reality. But even though it's a red herring, there's such great characterization in these tales of these DJs, or in Virgil Walker, and how he ends up getting killed and whatnot, that it adds to the milieu of the time too. Because as I said, this is a very Mickey Spillane like character, and he appears in the early '60s. This is when Mickey Spillane's books were at their height. So here we have an archetypal character that we're undercut, because in a Mickey Spillane book, Virgil Walker would be the hero that would defeat these mobsters, that would somehow expose them or whatnot. Here, he's an incidental character. So I've taken the mythos and the archetype of the mid 20th century private dick man of action and totally undercut him by making Virgil killed off early. It's sort of like Marion Crane in Psycho. for the first 30 or 40 minutes, she's the main character. She's running away, embezzling to meet her boyfriend, and then she ends up getting killed. So Virgil Walker serves the same kind of purpose that the Marion Crane character does in the Hitchcock film Psycho, in that we think that he's going to be an important character, but he ends up just being what is called a red shirt. He's killed off early.